Cool. So, does anyone know what cookies and sessions are, or how they're different, or have any semblance whatsoever? Ian.
Just because I blocked it. And cookies are basically a way of keeping track of state within HTTP applications, so between server and client, the cookies sent with each request and response back and forth. Which is just like a key value pair, so you can keep track of certain information from both sides. And sessions in Rails are for keeping track of secure pieces of information, so basically an encrypted piece of information that goes back and forth between client and server.
Cool. Did everyone get that? Right. Raise your hand if you got that. It's like I can't really say. Okay, cool. Does anyone else feel comfortable explaining that though? Cookies and sessions are pretty important. Anyone else? Yes. Sid.
It's just a way for your computer to remember if you visit a website and like there are no cookies or no sessions. Like once you X out, nothing will be remembered. So it's like a way to store information about the user or to retrieve from the server to like get that data.
Cool. Is everyone cool with that? All right. So to sum it all up, right? What cookies are just little bits of data that are passed back and forth between the client and the server with every single request, right? If I go to Google, I do a get to google.com. The server will send me back like the header information, right? And send me back some HTML, what that response is. And then I get that header. I know that it's doc type HTML, right? There's a head tag, there's a body tag, there's some sort of footer tag, right? And then if I put in something in my Google search, I'm all like, hey, what are cookies? And I hit search, that sends what? It sends a request to server. What kind of request though? Is it a get if I put something in the Google search form and I click the search button? I'm doing some sort of post, right? So again, I'm sending the headers with that post, right, back to the Google server. Google is going to take the search params, they're going to run their algorithm, and they're going to spit me back billions of queries, right? Probably like 10 per page though. And then they're going to send me back not just the headers with the cookies in it again, but a new response, right? With the HTML body, with the doc type and everything. And so these cookies are passed back and forth between every single request in the header. Sessions are something that Rails builds and will put inside the cookie and secure data from Rails. Are there any questions on that? Let's take a look at what that looks like. I could see that the weekend must have gotten you tired, or you must have eaten some food. So I'm going to play this game, and that is, unless you stop me or slow me down, just going to take off. Cool? I can tell that that's like the learning style for this class. Yes, absolutely. Look at this. I can always open my inspector. I could see this application, and I can open up my cookies. I could see in my localhost, I've built something already. Look at this value. This is not something that I wrote. This is something that's not necessarily human readable. It is encrypted because it's just like this large key value pair in a string that is unencrypted. Here, if I go to a different website and I open up my Chrome Inspector Tools, I can check the cookies, and I will not see the same type of cookie. Each cookie will be domain specific. So if I click this, I'm getting all of this, right? Look at these like sort of sessions, right? All of these is not human readable. Because I'm going to be passing back and forth information, I want to make sure that they're encrypted. So Rails will encrypt some piece of this data and stick it into the cookie. For example, this part is not necessarily encrypted. Whatever this is probably, I'm assuming, like some sort of like date annotation. That's not necessarily encrypted, right? Because what can like a hacker do with this information? Like, hey dude, hey girl, like this is the time, cool. You know, it's not like That doesn't need to be super encrypted. But all these other things like tokens probably need to be encrypted. Cool. So without further ado, I want to take you to Flavortown. Right? So that's just cookies and sessions in a nutshell. Great. What I have here in this application is I have nachos, right? So you can already assume there's some sort of nachos controller, right? Like a nacho model. And this looks like what? The index. I have a cart here, right? With this little like question mark. I need to build out this cart feature because you will learn more about like authentication and authorization and doing some sort of sign-in. So I decided to build a different functionality with sessions. And that is, I'm going to build like an e-commerce store. So here I am keeping track of my cart, and I have all of these items in here. Yeah?
You said sessions is a Rails thing that's built like within cookies?
Sessions is coming from Rails.
Okay. So if sessions comes from Rails, where do cookies come from? Is that like the client or is that?
Cookies is initially coming from the server, and then they're passed back and forth in every single request.
Okay.
Yeah? Cool. So really, this is just like this seed data coming from my BFF Andrew, right? Like if you click them, like these trash can nachos, like take a look what these are. Nachos literally made in a garbage can in the alleyway behind the restaurant. Nice, $25. I think he took something from Guy Fieri, like some like joke menu, and then he built out this. Took him way too long to seed this data, and now I use it forever. Basically, what we're trying to do is, let's think about this. I want to build out this shopping cart. So if I click add to cart, what should happen? I don't need to know any of the code, but what should happen? Okay, that sounds like code, persistent in the database. But what really should happen is not necessarily persistent in the database, is that when I click this, what I want to happen is I want something to be added to my cart, right? I want to now see it on the top of that list. Cool? Why would I not want this persisted to the database? Yes. If I save it to the database, right, I now create a row in my database for someone to just be like, all right, great. You wanted these 3 types of nachos. I'm going to save it, make a row, an instance in my database. But then what happens, right? If I go to, say, like another website, that data is still sort of there in my database. If I go to a different domain, I kind of just want it to last for that session. Otherwise, I would have way too much data. Someone would just go in and like make a shopping cart, and then I'd have to save it every single time. And then I have to attach that to what? A unique ID. Then I need to attach that unique ID to who or what, which is tricky because I don't even have like a user here, right? Like when you go to like Modell's, right, or Macy's or H&M or Uniqlo or wherever these stores are, and you're like, oh, this dress looks cute or those shoes look nice. Did you log in? When you go to Amazon, do you have to be logged in to add something to your cart? Like, no, right? So I don't really necessarily want them saved to the database. I just want it for that particular session. Cool? All right, so first thing is, if I click this button, I need to add it to the cart. As we already know about like how Rails works or like the web works, what does this button do when I click it? What should it do? Just abstractly, like, what happens when I click a button? It posts somewhere, right? So, knowing that, I need to post something, right? What do I post to, and is it really like a post? Am I creating a new object here? No. Let me give you a hint, right? If this is my nachos index in my nachos controller, pulling data from my nacho model, what should I be using for my shopping cart? some sort of like nachos cart, right? Or like a cart controller. That way I have the ability to handle these requests. Because when I click it, I can always do a post to what? The nachos controller and hit some sort of like update method or something like that inside my nachos cart and my cart controller. Otherwise, if I click this, right, would it make sense to go into my nacho controller to update my shopping cart? No, I should be hitting this button and going to some sort of cart controller. That make sense? Okay, so let's actually, hold on. Whoops. I need to get rid of this actually. Boop, boop, boop. Cool, 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 cool. Great. Can you see this? Okay, cool. So, first thing I need to do is what? Let's take a look at this nachos index, all right? This is exactly the website you've seen. I just iterate through all my nachos. I'm building this little button that says add to cart, get me to work. Where do I want this button to go? Okay, sure. Something called add nachos to cart path, right? That's just kind of what makes sense here, right? What's it actually doing, right? Is this going to be a get or a post, right? I could do a post here. But am I creating a new object within my cart? Or am I just updating my cart? Updating, right? So what should I put in here actually instead of post? Patch, right? Cool. Now that I have a patch, right, and some sort of add nachos to cart, what route is this actually? Do I have an add nachos to cart path, a route? Okay. So I will make one. Right? We know it's a patch, and that's going to be to where? What's cart? Okay. That's fine. So here, this custom route essentially is like nebulous. It doesn't really matter what it hits. It's going to be the path that makes sense to me. I'm just going to do a patch to /carts, and I know I'm going to be putting it to something called my carts controller with a method. If it's a patch following RESTful routing, I'm going to do an update. And because I already used the path helper, I'm going to call this add nacho to cart. That way, the prefix becomes, the helper becomes add nacho to cart path. Cool? So again, one more time, in my nachos, in my index, right, in my routes, all I'm doing is add nachos to cart path, right, add nacho to cart path, it's going to hit here, and it's just going to hit cart/update. So in my carts controller, I probably need some sort of method called update. Here we go. In here, what do we want to do? Well, let's actually first see if we can bother hitting the buy bug just to make sure that our route matches, right, and everything works. Keep this short feedback loop. Hit refresh. Okay. I didn't like that. Does it have to be a string? Cool. So if I hit this, right, I should hit the buy bug. I see right here that I did. Cool. Ugh. Cool. Here I can check my params, right? I'm hitting this patch. I have my authenticity token because I'm using a Rails helper method. And I'm hitting in my controller something called carts with the action update. What am I missing from these params? Well, I don't have any actual Nacho ID. I have nothing to actually identify what this is over here. So if that's the case, I know now that I need to pass in these params. Cool? How can I pass in these params? Well, let's take a look at my code. I have a button to. Great. So Rails button to. If I really wanted to, button to params. Cool? I look at these API docs over here. And what I see is that there are options that I can pass into button 2, right? We had the name, we had these options, right? And it takes in a block. Here I've already used method, right? Where I hard-coded a patch instead of like a post, and I overrode it. On the bottom, it says params. I can pass in an extra option of params with the key of params, and it looks like they're going to be rendered as hidden fields. So let's take a look. Here, in my method patch, in this object, I can also pass in params. And those params are going to be key value pairs, which just makes sense because my params need a key and my params need a value. So what key and what value do I want? Right? I want something like Nacho ID to be equal to what? Remember, I'm in this iterator, so I actually have the object Nacho, and I just want the ID to pass through. Let's see what actually comes up on the params. Let's continue. Let's go back to Nacho Town. Look at this Guy Fieri stud. If I hit add to cart, I should be back in my buy bug, and I check the params. I should see now the Nacho ID is pointing to 1. Nice. Cool. Let's get really explicit, and let's also add another key value pair, and let's put, Nacho ID is kind of hard to identify, right? Let's put Nacho name, and let's get the Nacho.name out of there, just to pass them into the param so I have them. Cool? So I'm just gonna continue again. Go back to Flavortown with a quick refresh. Hit 2, just in case. I want to make sure that it's dynamic, right? I should be seeing like ID2 come through. So if I do, check the params. I do in fact see Nacho ID2 with the Nacho name of mac and cheese nachos. So I'm in fact grabbing the data from here through the params, through the button. What can I do with that information? Well, first thing I can do is, where's my carts controller, right? First thing I can do is I can definitely do, let's do this, right? Let the user know something happened. Cool. And how can I do that? A little flash action, right? Just a key of message. I don't have to put a key of errors because that's a custom thing that I made. Just like I'm making this custom key of message. And that's just going to be, right? Hey, you added. And then how do I get access to this? These are params. Can I do a params of nacho name? Cool, mac and cheese nachos. Great, you added, and I'm going to string interpolate params, add a key of nacho name, cool, to your cart. Nice. Good deal. And what should I do? It's just going to add this flash message, right? And now I have to send it back to the index. So redirect to nachos path. That's just going to send me right back to the index. Roll a little bit of code. Now let's test. Cool. So refresh. Cool. If I add this, I should see, if I continue, well, I definitely added the flash. I probably now need to go back to my index and do right here and do flash, add a key of message, right? I'm just going to render it. The problem is, what if I come here and there is no flash at a key message? It will break because it'll say nil, right? So again, back to that nil wrapping. I want to do if flash message. Oops. simply render the message. See if this breaks on me. Boom. Cool. Let's add these mac and cheese ones. I have to continue. Yeah, I know. Cool. Look at this. Trash can nachos. What about these dessert nachos? What are dessert nachos? That sounds gross. Extra cheese nachos topped with deep fried Oreos and tempura ice cream. Gross. $5. What a steal. 5-star experience. Great. Now I have these flash messages working, right? Something I want to explain. We talked about cookies in sessions, but we never actually did anything with them. All right? Who can tell me what the flash hash is and what it does?
Flash hash saves your grams for one extra state, extra session.
Absolutely, right? Flash hash allows me to persist, right, some piece of data, anything, right? Anything I want to pass it, for one extra request. That being said, for my shopping cart, do I want it to last one request? No, I want it to be there essentially the whole time I'm like using this, right? Every time I'm like in this one browsing session, I want this to exist. So let's check the buy bug one more time. And if I hit refresh and I want to add these chicken pot pie nachos, I'm going to get stuck right back in this buy bug. I can check what the flash hash is and see it's nothing, right? Because I haven't added it yet. But there's another unique hash that we have access to. What did I say it was? Well, cookies is part of the browser, right? Sessions, right? Rails will add something to your param. So, what is session? It's this monster object. It's monster-like object. Cool? Oops. It's this huge object. What do you think is in there? Yes, the matrix. Neo's in here. The one is waiting, right? It's all of this data. All of it. What are the key parts of this? What do you see here? At generators? Cool, cool, cool. Right? At auto load equals false? Cool. Right? At all load paths. These are where your instance variables are being stored. Right? Because what happens is, big picture, high level, this is just a class, right? As is this. This is just a class. When I go to /nachos, right, which again is my index, I am instantiating a new instance of my nachos controller. So my instance variables for my nachos controller will exist. That gets passed through from the session into the cookie, all right? And then it's rendered because it now represents like a piece of data. All of this, your nacho.all, is that something you want necessarily exposed and open to every single user out there? No, definitely not, right? So you want to encrypt it. And so when we create this session, we encrypt the data, right? Any questions on like this session here? It just exists every single time because Rails is creating this session for you and it's putting it inside the cookie. The reason it's doing that is because it could then get passed back and forth every single time. So I talked about how all these different requests are stateless. So what happens in the request stays in the request. Okay, talking to myself. What happens is, we have access to something called session here, right? And that is nothing more than a extremely large hash, right? Which will then get encrypted into Rails. So if I have session, right, does a session at a key of hot dog exist? No. That's ridiculous, right? But if I wanted to say session at a key of hot dog equals to Flavortown, I can just do that because it's just like a regular hash. I can then ask, hey, what is session of key of Flavortown? I mean, session to key of hot dog, it'll give me back Flavortown. Cool? So that being said, I could probably do something like Nacho IDs, all right? And then pass in the Nacho IDs that I want to pass in, all right? Like something. Cool. What do I have here right now? Do I have access to the Nacho ID that I want to pass in into my session? Sweet. So would it make sense to do something like this, where the params now are going to be what I pass in for the session and a key of Nacho ID. Cool? So now, through the session, in the same way that Flash works, but Flash works for just one request, session will work as it gets passed back and forth. It will always have access to this key of Nacho ID.
How long does the session last, just until you close your tab?
The session lasts, right? Because remember, it's getting embedded inside the cookie, as long as the cookie lasts. So once I delete the cookie, the session will also disappear.
And the cookies last until you...
The cookies last, by default, like an insane amount of time. I don't know, like weeks or something, I forget. Which is why you're basically always logged into Gmail until you clear your cache and cookies, and you have to log into all your websites again. That's what's happening here. That's like the magic in the background, right? You can manually set when they expire. So for example, right, certain websites require a higher level of security, so you want those sessions and those cookies to expire much faster. For example, right, let's just say I go to github.com, right? If someone wants to mess with me, honestly, like, okay, cool, man. Like, it's gonna be logged in, right? My Gmail, it's just gonna be logged in. But what if you were on your banking app, like Chase, right? Bank of America. Do you want that session or that cookie to last more than like 10, 15 minutes? You probably just want to go in there, check your balance, like, oh, negative $8, that's great. And then you want to shut it down. You don't want that session to be live. So I would, if I was like doing security on a banking app, have that session or cookie last maybe 2 minutes. And then every 2 minutes, pester and annoy the user, hey, if you don't click OK, I'm just going to delete this session. And then if you don't click anything, you automatically get logged out. Does that make sense? And so that's kind of what's happening here. But by default, they last like days or weeks, I think. But you can set them.
Do you ever run into, because it's persisting the session on the server, so does that ever run into like memory issues? If you're persisting for all your users for a very long amount of time?
Say the question again one more time.
Well, so basically, so like whenever you create a session variable, it's like assigned to a specific, you know, it has an ID, so that's how it relates back to the cookie for an individual user. But for the actual session, isn't that being saved in the server somewhere on memory?
It's being saved, yes, in the server memory, right? And so I'm going to make a quick tangent on this, only because it's so important. We don't actually teach this here, but it's very important to understand, right? This session, this one session is live right now, right? And remember I talked about domain. Domain is cookie independent, right? If I'm on like, you know, Bank of America, those cookies are different from localhost 3000, as they are different from reddit.com. So something we don't really kind of get into is I can do, what is it, NYC Web 10. You guys are 10. And then I think this is 25. Yeah, CD 25, right? I did something like Rails S, right? And what port did it start at? You act like you're not sure. It's 3000, no big deal. I could change the port and do 4567 if I wanted to. Now, I will start this server. It's running right now with a different PID. I can in fact do this. I can spin up a different server. I don't want to like deal with this right now. But I can spin up another server. Meaning I can go to, if I wanted to, a different localhost 4567. And it will run my exact code. I will get the same user experience, but I will get a different session. And that's how every single person that goes to your website will have unique sessions, right? I'm going to log in and I'm going to give you your session ID. And so you're logged in for that. Cool? Does that make sense? All right. Really good question. Thank you for that. It's worth the detour. All right. So, boop, boop, boop. back to this one though, right? So I can assign this session with a random key that I want, a value that I want. So let me do that. I can always do session with like nacho IDs. And I can be, great, now this is the params of nacho ID. Cool. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Why is your session value plural?
Say again?
Why is nacho IDs plural?
I'll guess that in a second. But right now, sure. Just keep nacho ID. Cool. All right, now I want to redirect to the nachos path. What will happen? Huh? Probably. It'll save the nacho ID in the session. So realistically, can I do something like, if I wanted to, go through my session hash of nacho ID in here? Just one? Cool. All right. But let's think about this. Let's think this through. Ready? Let's build a more scalable application. I have a carts controller, and I currently only have one model, right? And that is my nacho model with my nacho controller. What if Flavortown, just hypothetically, also sold hot dogs and hamburgers? Do I want all of the logic about adding something to my cart from the nacho inside just like the cart controller? Where would I want to put something that has access to all of the controllers? Maybe something that potentially inherits from something that has access to all the controllers. Yes, very good. So smart. Huh? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah? Great. So I'm in my application controller. Cool. All right. Now this is where I want to extract all of that like logic from my cart so that I can now use it for like anything. First thing I want to do is, and this is kind of like where you want to start thinking ahead before you start coding because you need to understand the whole picture. In my application controller, I want to have something called cart. All right. And what that cart is just going to hold the IDs of all of the objects, whether it be like a nacho, a hot dog, a hamburger. I'm still kind of hungry. I didn't eat enough for lunch, right? Anything you want. So let's build that real quick. Just one thing at a time, right? I'm just going to call it cart because I'm very creative and unique. What should this return? What is a good type of data structure to hold a bunch of these IDs in it? An array, right? So I can just be like, great, array. Cool. But not just a regular old array. What do I want with this cart? I want this cart to have access to every single request. Yes. So that it can hold that data. So I can do session with a key of what? For right now, let's just put nacho, but essentially it could just be like item, right? Like items, IDs, or whatever, right? But for right now, because we only have one model, and just for me to be more explicit so you can see it, I'm just going to put nacho IDs. All right, so this cart's just going to hold nacho IDs. All right, cool. And I want it to be equal to an array. Yeah? The problem is this. Whenever I call cart, what's going to happen to session of nacho IDs? I always override it to an empty array. So whenever I click it, it goes, oh, just kidding, this is not going to be an empty array. That's not very good. So I want it to be what? I probably want it to be what? Shovel? Shovel what? Session nacho ID? That's weird. Who thinks this is right? Params? Here's what I'm thinking, right? So we get this idea that it's an array and it needs to shovel on some information, but let's hold off on that. All I right now need is just some sort of array. So what I can do is I could put if this key value exists for session ID, then I can just return what this is. Otherwise, oops, make it an array. Oops. Cool. That way I'm not overriding it every time I call cart. So when I'm on the bottom here and I'm like cart, and I want to shovel on, right, like 1, like an ID of 1, my nacho ID 1 or something, right? I can call cart and it'll go, wait, does this exist? If it does, great, return it. Otherwise, make this an empty array for the first time. It will shovel on 1, and then when I call cart and I shovel on 2, it will call cart, and it will see that it exists, and it will return the array with the number 1 in it. Are there any questions on this? Awesome. This right here is crappy code. What you can do is you can do session, the key of Nacho's ID, rather Nacho IDs. And really what this is saying is, I want this to be equal to an empty array. Something called memoization. Who has seen this before? Right? It means or. Who has seen or equals? What is this? Try again. This is not a conditional. This is a.
It's like A or A equals B, right?
No.
If you would think about it, no?
No. What it's saying is exactly these 5 lines. I mean, you could try to explain it. It's fine. You want to try explaining it?
No.
Okay, sure. This is all this is saying, right? These 5 lines here. Are there any questions on this memoization? Yes.
How does session Nacho's ID know what's set to an empty array? Isn't that just
Literally right here. It's saying session Nacho's ID, right? Return session's Nacho ID. If I call cart, return session's Nacho ID. If it does not exist, assign it to an empty array.
Okay.
Right? Or equals. Cool? Great. What about this method add nacho to cart? Let's make it. Cool. And what does this do? Yeah, it adds a nacho to a cart, right? So I have cart here. Remember, you could build these helper methods. Remember mod 1? And now I want to shovel on the Nacho ID. But where is this Nacho ID coming from? I need to pass it in. Right? Item ID does not really matter. Now you see the value of this cart because it's just returning this session. Great. Now I need this last method, right? Get the nachos with the cart and pass it to the controller to send to the view. Great. How would I create something that I can pass in from the controller to the view? That's right, the instance variable. Who's in there? Okay. Great. What do I want to name this instance variable? Sure, nachos, right? And what is nachos equal to? Here is something interesting, right? Have you seen this, right? This is a cart. What is a cart? It's an array. Great. I'll just move fast like I said I would. We have nacho.all here, right? Let's check our seed data. Cool. There is approximately 10 nachos in here. So if I did nacho.find with 1, I would get 1 nacho. If I did nacho find 1 and 2, it will return to nachos. I can pass this an array of IDs, and it will return that number. So it looks like find will accept an array. I have conveniently here an array. I can call nacho.find with cart, which is the array of information I want. This will turn these into nacho objects, then I can then iterate through into the view, because now I have these at nachos, right? So I could say something like display cart in here. It's just going to take these, find the actual item, so now at nachos exists as an instance variable. I go back to my nachos controller, because remember, it inherits from application controller. I can call all of these methods because they're being inherited, and I can just call display cart. This will give me access to at nachos that I can then render here, which is an array, and then I can do at nachos.each do with a nacho object, because that's what they all are. Okay, that was aggressive. Okay, and then now I can just do the nacho with a name, right? No, I want to take this up. And I think I want to move that out. Yeah. Then I'm just going to create a list item for each one of these. Cool. So if we go back, what we should see, where are all my nachos? Oh, I'm overwriting it. I'm doing at nachos twice. So this should be cart nachos. Cool. I'm stuck on this bug. Where's this bug? Here we go. Cool. What is happening over here?
You're overriding your array.
I'm overriding the array, right? So I actually need to be calling in what? Where's my... I need to be calling here, right? Because I'm no longer assigning it in this line. I'm going to be pulling from here, which nacho to cart, and I can just pass it in. Remember, I have params and a key of nacho ID. And all that's going to do is it's going to shovel it right onto the cart. So I can add danger dogs, trash can nachos, mac and cheese nachos, and deep fried nachos. And I can refresh all I want, and they will persist. But if I wanted to, I can go into application, I can go into my cookies, I can go my local storage, I can delete all my cookies, and if I refresh, they will be gone. I get a brand new session every time I refresh. So if I add this, and I delete it, and refresh, it's gone, and it creates a new session for me. Are there any questions on how sessions and cookies work to persist data from state to state and request to request? Yes?
I guess I'm stuck on the cookie to session ratio. Is it for every cookie you have one session, or?
No, the session gets created by Rails, and then it gets put in the cookie. The cookie holds that session, and it gets passed back and forth every single request, right? So if I were to do trash can nachos, this session is here inside this cookie. And as I refresh, right, this session data persists inside this cookie. Until I delete my cookies, it will still have all of that session information. Very good question. Are there any other questions for sessions and cookies?
So like, if you had sign in, sign out functionality, would that essentially be like resetting cookies?
It wouldn't be resetting cookies. If I were to build sign in, sign out, all I would do is instead of this nacho ID, I do user.findBy. I would take the user ID and then put it inside my session, and the session would be a key of user ID. And that way, every single one of these requests, I have this user ID session, and then I can do user.findBy, and then I can just put user.name, and it'd be like, hey, guess what? You're logged in, Wangtron. Cool. It's going to be more about tomorrow with auth and part 1 and 2. Yeah.
This is maybe asking ahead, but how would it work if the same user logs in on multiple devices or spots?
The same user logging on multiple devices, right? Remember, each session, each browser window, here, I'll take a look. Ready? I will have both trash can and mac and cheese nachos. I can open up incognito. I can go to localhost 3000/nachos, and what will I see? An empty cart, because they do not share the same cookies. Right? I can add dessert nachos here, and then refresh this, and nothing will happen. Right? So your phone and your mobile, your desktop, do not share state.
But you would want it to share, right? If it's really the same person. If he's working with, let's say he's shopping on Amazon, you need one card to be allowed to a different device. If it's
I would associate the cart with the user, and then if that user logs in on a different device, I would have that cart information. Yeah? In the same way that if I create an account on Amazon, literally go right now to just Amazon.com. Oops. And I was like, great, let's get Prime. Would I have to then log in with my phone? Yeah. And then I can share state once I'm both logged in. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Could you put back to the
Which one?
the middle page for add nacho to cart when we pass in the nacho ID? I'm wondering how if you're passing in a nacho ID, how then on the front end are we actually seeing the words like trash can nacho?
Absolutely. So, start to finish, right? I'm on index. Cool? I'm right here. I see all of them. I hit this button, right? It does add to cart, and what it does is it's a patch to this particular route, and it passes in a nacho ID, right? From my routes, I know it's going to hit my carts controller, right? The update that I built before. Because I have the params of nacho name and nacho ID coming from this button, I then just do this method called add nacho to cart with the params of the nacho ID that I'm getting from this button. All that method does is it takes a nacho ID and it adds it to my cart, which is just currently an empty array. I then do display cart, right, which at cart nachos exists here. So add nacho to cart is called. Now my cart has one item in it. I redirect to the nachos path, which will take me to index. At nachos is nacho.all. I call a method called display cart, which is going to give me the access to the instance variable, which is going to be nacho.find with the one item I just added from this button. And then it's going to render the index. The index, as we looked at, right back, boop, boop, boop. There's a way. Here we go. Forget it, it's fine. If we look, I'm calling at cart nachos because it's coming from at cart nachos, which is coming from the controller display cart. So here, to the render, to the index, then nacho name. So that's the full circle there. Are there any other questions? Great, that's all I have for you today.